Oh, thank goodness, it is almost autumn again.
We're home.
And I am so ready to dig into these felts and block them. But before I can get to that, I have a custom order that I need to work on, which means digging into the wools as I'm making my Blair blocked headband and bow piece. Of course, I need to create the foundation of the headband out of something more substantial than this thin drapey crepe. And since my client is on a tight deadline, I'm using Fosshape, which I get from Be Unique Millinery Supplies, as my foundation material of choice. Fosshape is a felt-like thermoplastic fabric that is often used to replace buckram. It can be easily cut, blocked, and heat-shaped to create bases for covered millinery pieces. You can use a steamer, iron, or heat gun to take it from pliable to rigid easily. It comes in white or black and 3 weights, with 300 being the thinnest and 600 the thickest. I'm using the 400 weight black today. My block is the Hatblocks Australia HB3 rounded headband block, and I'll be using this to form the foundation of the piece. Those of you who have invested in a good hat block before know how precious they are and how costly to repair or replace. You need to use the right kind of blocking pins to make sure you don't damage the wood while holding your blocking material in place to dry, or in this case, harden. But what do you do when your block has a thin, tapered end and even your fine pins would punch straight through? There's a simple way to solve the problem, and I'll walk you through it. If you sew, you already have everything you will need. First, cover your block in plastic wrap to protect the wood from the heat and steam of blocking, and to keep the blocking materials from sticking to it. Measure out how much Fosshape you will need to completely cover the top of the block, with extra to wrap around to the underside. I eyeball this, and it helps that when unheated, Fosshape has some stretch to it. Loosely clothespin the Fosshape to each end of your block, making sure it wraps evenly over each tip and around to the underside of the block on both sides. At this point, you may have guessed what we're doing here. Yep, we are sewing the Fosshape to the block. I start with a doubled length of thread in a very visible color, since we want to see our progress, and the thread will be removed after blocking. Now, this is not a difficult or precise technique. I start in the middle here. We are literally whip stitching the Fosshape to the block. It does not, and I repeat, does not need to be pretty. You only need to ensure the material is smoothly covering the block and stitches are tight enough to hold the Fosshape in place, as it will shrink as it hardens. Whip stitch it from the center of the block, working outward. And periodically check to make sure it is pulled tight enough. Also, there is no shame in the running out of thread game. That's going to happen. That's normal. Please don't cut yourself an overly long length of thread trying to make it from one end to the other, because it'll just knot totally up and it'll be super frustrating. Don't cut yourself some long threads. Do yourself a favor, just make a knot, finish it off, get a new length of thread, keep going. When you come to the end tip of the block, take extra care to smooth the Fosshape around the ends so that it's pulled smoothly and there are no creases in the material around the ends. Use a few extra stitches to reinforce that area, as it can easily get pulled out of shape when we heat the material. And if I have extra thread, I won't tie it off right there at the end. I'll just go ahead and double back, because again, you can't tighten it down too much. You really do need it to be taut against there with no give. And we're doing the same thing to the other side, just starting from the center and working our way out to the other end. Now we're just finishing up that final end and giving it the last few securing stitches. And you can see in the center there that my Fosshape isn't completely meeting in the very middle of the headband. That's okay, as long as I have at least a 1/2 inch fold under on each side. And now it is time to go ahead and press it down. You can use either a steamer, an iron, or a heat gun. I like to go in, just because it's a little satisfying to get rid of all the fuzzies, with the steamer first. It kind of gives you an idea of what it's going to look like. And then later I'll go in with my iron and really press it down so that it firms up the Fosshape. As you're doing this, remember that it can be tempting to think that you're done when you feel it harden on the outside. And the exterior of that Fosshape that's right against your steamer is going to firm up very quickly. But you have to get that steam and that heat penetrating through the entire thickness of this Fosshape. Now I'm only using 400. If I were using 600, I would have to steam or press even longer than I'm doing on this piece. But you want to make sure that that heat is reaching the same temperature on the outside as it is on the inside, so that your entire layer of Fosshape is evenly heated and stiffened all the way through. Otherwise, you're going to have little weak points when you take it off of the block. So just giving it a light steaming like I am now is definitely not enough to firm it up. I'm going to have to go back in with the iron and really press it down to make it nice and firm all the way around. You can kind of press on it with your thumb or your finger and see if it has any spring back. And the more you work with this, the more you'll get used to that feeling. If it has spring back, then it's definitely not completely rigid under there. You probably still have some soft, squishy points. I usually go over the edges of my block first. One, because it's super satisfying, because you're really laying that edge in and getting it nice and crisp, but also because that is going to be part of the shape that holds so much of the structure, so you want to make sure it's really rigid. And as you can see, as I'm going over this, there's going to be a shine developing on that edge. That's where the thermoplastic is melted down really well. You want to achieve that shine over the entire surface of your Fosshape piece. And I just test the rigidity as I go, because I'm a little scattered with how I iron, which is probably the downside, but I'm not patient enough to just stay in one place the whole time until it's perfect there and move on. I just go all over, so I have to keep checking every inch of it to make sure that I don't have any weak spots. And this can take a while. So you will spend a little bit more time blocking the Fosshape than, say, using buckram or cinema, but you won't have that drying down time, which means you can go ahead and block and cover your piece in the same couple hours as opposed to drying it overnight. And make sure that you go back in and really work on the underside as well, because that is the edge that's going to be holding your millinery wire in. You definitely don't want that to be flexible and bendy and soft either. So make sure that you're paying just as much attention to the underside as you are the top side of your Fosshape. And you can see where it once was puffy and fluffy, it has now pressed all the way down and has become very flat. And I'm just checking it to see how it's doing all over. And at this point, I'm still feeling a little give. So it's time to break the iron out and go back over it. And once you feel it's done, give it maybe 10 minutes to sit and cool down a little bit. And then we're going to go in with an X-Acto knife, and I just got a brand new one, so woohoo, new tool. We're going to go in with an X-Acto knife and use that to carefully cut away the Fosshape from the block. You want to be really, really careful because obviously you do not want to slice into your beautiful block, so you have to go very gently and layer by layer run through the Fosshape. Think of it like gently scoring so that you don't go all the way through, and you do want to leave maybe about 1/2 an inch, 3/8 of an inch of overlap on the underside so that you will have enough to sew your wire into, to wrap your fabric around, to place your finishing edge, whether that be Petersham or a blocked underside edge. You definitely want to leave the overhang, so make sure you don't just slice it right there on the edge. And this is definitely a slow, steady as you go kind of thing. You can go back in and lift up your scored pieces and remove them with the scissors once they are free. Just again, be careful with the scissors not to scratch your block. I find it easier to remove the Fosshape in small pieces rather than all at once because you can control your cutting a little bit better. And if I have any larger scraps, which I'm definitely not going to have from this headband, but if I have larger scraps of Fosshape from a larger piece that I used it on, I will save those because a lot of the time they make really great bases, like hard little coin-sized bases for creating feather mounts, or maybe some sewn fabric flowers or silk flowers. They're very useful. Now be extra careful when you are cutting around your points because this is the time when one little slip and you're going to slice into the point. And notice I just kind of hacked there against my advice, but that was to get through a really stiff spot in the Fosshape. Again, please do take your time with this, especially if it is your first time trying. Because I think we can all agree that blocks are precious. No reason to go fast on this unless you're in a crunch, which then I don't advise trying something new. But yeah, this is just something to practice with a little bit, go slow, get the feel of it. But I really do think it gives you the most control and the best blocked shape that you can get with Fosshape, especially on something with such tiny little tapered ends. Once you have most of it cut away, just check and see if you still feel a little bit of squishy, especially around those ends where the Fosshape was condensed. There might still be a couple chewy bits, for lack of a better description. And you can go back in and use your iron and really press those down just to make sure you have a nice, smooth, turned under edge. And I'm just getting some of that plastic wrap out of the way because I might melt it, but that's also why I have the iron protector on my iron so that I don't end up with plastic wrap stuck to my iron. They're about $20 on Amazon and very worth it. Now when I start to remove the blocked piece from the actual block, I'll start at one of the ends because usually I can peel one of the sides away just a little bit, enough to wiggle that block out of there, and you can cut like a small slit into it to get it started, and just sew that back up when you're done. And usually if you can get one of the ends loose, you can just slide the whole thing out, which is what I've just done. And there you go. You're ready to wire and cover and trim and finish. Ta-da! And she's all boxed up and ready to head to Germany. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and learned something today, please consider liking and subscribing to my channel, as it helps me continue creating more millinery content. So long hat friends!